A big thanks to Gymnastic Planet for supporting this episode. Gymnastics is a challenging sport, but having the right tools in your gym bag really does help. Gymnastic Planet is a leading manufacturer and distributor of essential training kit. They provide the best quality products, including world-class SPEEF equipment, handguards and chalk. They also specialise in club services like venue design, maintenance and installation. Backed by decades of experience, from competing and coaching to club management, Gymnastic Planet aims to help gymnasts succeed and enjoy their craft. If you'd like to find out more, visit gymnasticplanet.com. In this episode, I'm joined by James Hall, one of Great Britain's best male artistic gymnasts. Over the course of his career, he's won 11 major championship medals. In Tokyo 2020, which became Tokyo 2021, he finished 8th in the all-around final, which made him the 8th best gymnast on the planet. I'm joined by him today. He's a friend, a teammate. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and this is his story. James, thanks for coming, mate. It was your birthday at the weekend, and it's always baffled me that you've grown up with Courtney Tulloch, you've trained together, and you share the same birthday, and it's the same. You're the same year, right?
Yeah, we're the exact same age.
Incredible. I had the same birthday as Reece Beckford, but we were different gyms, and he was a year older.
Yeah.
I just think that's such a unique thing because I just think it's crazy. Every time I see posts on social media every year when it's both of your birthdays, I'm like, wow, what an incredible thing to have happened for you to grow up together, train together, be training partners, and then
I remember discovering that as well. We were in the gym he must have been training at Pegasus for a few years, not even known. And then I think one of us was like, oh, it's my birthday on Saturday or whatever. And then the other one was like, hold on, it's mine as well. But what? And then we were best friends from there on. So
what a story,
that's the story. Yeah.
When did Courtney then move to Pegasus? Because Pegasus used to be the gym where there's that massive swimming pool, and you would go and do like the Pegasus Open.
So we started in, it's called Christmill Lane, just a tiny little lane in the back of Beyond in nowhere. It was essentially a shed.
Right.
And that was founded, well, actually it started off in a school way before my time, and I think its inception was in 1980s by Fef Griffin and her husband. And yeah, they slowly built that, and then it went to Christmill Lane, this tiny little place, and built. In 2008, that's when Court joined us, and then in 2014 we moved into the new premises. But the leisure centre you were talking about, that was where we held the Pegasus Open.
Right. Okay. So that wasn't where the gym was.
No, the gym was way too small for that, and we rent that out, and that was where it all started. That was where the magic happened, and the rest is history.
That was literally my favourite competition ever as a kid, because I'd go and do that competition, then you get free access to the swimming pool, and they had a 10-metre diving board, and you just leg it.
Wanted to get the comp out the way just to go on the diving boards.
Wow, that's brought me back to that competition. That has me. Just to start off with, then, tell us a little bit about what life has been like in the last few months. Obviously, the Olympic Games has been and gone. Mm-hmm. This cycle, you were massively influential. I think you've been on one of the most incredible runs since 2015, James, when you were part of that Worlds team in 2015. It's almost been a decade. What has the summer been like for you, and what's life looking like right now?
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed it. I think that's something my older years as an athlete has sort of taught me. Is I think when I was younger, it was very much competition was a stressful time, and of course it is now, but it's just different. And I was able to really enjoy this summer. I think not necessarily that the pressure was off around the games. I still had a job to do. I still had a responsibility, but I think after the games, I went on holiday, and usually I get the blues after a major competition and feel absolutely terrible. But this time it was different. I think I felt as though I'd done everything I wanted to do, and I was very proud of the way I conducted myself and the training that I put in and everything that I did to kind of support the team and to, do it for myself. And I was very proud of the guys and how they performed out there. So in a way, it was kind of, my job is done. I can go and sort of be James for a little bit as opposed to James the gymnast. Yeah. So I really did feel as though everything was in the right place. And, now we're in October. I don't know where the last 3 months have suddenly gone, but it was time well spent, definitely.
When you look back now in hindsight, given that the Games has finished, James, I think a lot of people on the outside would have been initially surprised at the selection that you weren't in the team because you've been such a backbone of the team for so long. But in your mind, in the build-up to this year, were you almost preparing yourself for, right, I'm getting older. It's getting harder for me to physically hold on. There are a lot of new young guys coming through.
Yeah.
There could be a potential for me not to be on this team. So in a way, did that almost make it slightly easier for you to deal with that hammer blow of not being selected for a team? Because I'm sure you wanted to be, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
You trained 4 years for that moment. And did it help, given the fact that you'd already become an Olympian?
Yeah, I think it definitely, for me, I think the pressure was off, because my dream, honestly, was to go to Olympic Games. It was never be Olympic champion or this world medal or that apparatus. It was go to Olympic Games. And I'm not saying that's the epitome of an athlete's career. You know, your career is what you make of it. But for me, that was my goal all along, ever since I was, started gymnastics, ever since I figured out what the Olympic Games was. And, I wanted to be that guy that was there. And I guess your role develops. And for me, I've never been one to say that, I'm definitely going to be on that team, whether it's Europeans, Worlds, or, even a club competition. You have to be fit, you have to be ready, your head has to be in the right space. And, it's always a possibility that you might not make the team. You might, but I think the possibility is larger that you might not. And I think the beginning of this year we approached it differently ever since Tokyo. I think, again, you have your role as an athlete, and for me as a gymnast, and you have your role for your teammates and sort of how you want to perform and things like that. And I think that changed after Tokyo. I wanted to go for broke for this one. I wanted to try the huge connections on high bar. I wanted to, try and stick the landings on floor, something that I'd never really gone for, and, push the difficulty as well as the execution and really fulfill my potential. And this year, I feel as though I did that. I succeeded in one way, and I think I still succeeded towards the Olympic Games. For me, not making the team wasn't a failure.
Yeah.
I set out to do certain things, and I managed them. And, those guys that made the team, every single one of them deserved to be there. And a few that didn't make the team definitely deserved to be there. And that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And for me, I left no stone unturned. And even when I was at the games watching the guys compete, I thought, you know what, I'll just let them do their thing. It's not that I want to be down there.
Okay.
I'm proud watching. And they did an incredible job. They didn't look out of place. Every single one of them looked like it wasn't just their first games. It was, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. But you had some 19-year-olds down there, 20-year-olds, and, Max, who is ancient now. But it was a pleasure to watch and a pleasure to be a part of, and I wouldn't change anything.
Was that mentality different, and would it have been different, though, 4 years previous if you'd have missed out on the games and been the reserve, or even 2 years, 1 year prior, when your goal is still to be at that games in 2024?
I guess,
when you're then there watching the other guys go out and compete.
I think some of it may have been different, but again, I think particularly for me over the last few years, I've learned a lot about myself. Okay. I think I've been introduced to myself really ever since 2020. And I guess as a young, hungry athlete, you think, I want to achieve my dream, get to the Olympic Games. But I think I would have been, the pressure would have been different had I not been an Olympian already. But I think the way my mind works as well, as long as I've left no stone unturned and given it absolutely everything, then that's all you can ask. Yeah. It's not a failure to have not made the games. Mm-hmm. It's, that's the way it is, and that's not the be all and end all. I've had some great memories, some great competitions, and for me, something like the Commonwealth Games in Australia was my favourite competition. And I've done all the competitions now, but because of it was in Australia, which is where I was born, and my family got to go out there, and it was just this magical place. That's what made it this incredible competition. And I guess for me, Tokyo was more of a symbol, the Olympic Games, rather than, people always ask, there was no crowd, there was no this, there was no that. And in the village, it was business as usual. People weren't wearing masks, but sometimes they were and things like that, but it was business as usual. And when you go to Olympic Games, you put your arm up, you compete, you become an Olympian. It's the symbol. It doesn't matter who was watching and things like that. It's that lifelong dream that I had that finally came to fruition.
when I was doing the research for this episode, James, it's always great when I find a little thing that I'd forgot. And reading that you were born in Australia, I was like, oh, I knew that, but I forgot that. How did that come about, mate? Are either of your parents Australian, or did they move to Australia?
No, they moved out there in, I think it was So my sister was born in England in 88.
Okay.
And then 1989, I believe, they moved out there just for better quality of life.
Okay.
And most of my family on my dad's side had moved out there anyway, again, for opportunities and things like that. And my family's very much, if they fancy a change, they're going to do it. They're just throw caution to the wind, and obviously calculated, but they wanted something different, and they did it. And then me and my brother were born out there. Brother's 1990 and I'm 95, and we moved back 1997, I believe. So I was about a year and a half.
Okay.
Which sucks because I don't really remember any of it. Apparently we had a pool and stuff like that. So real shame. But yeah, it was just quality of life, and they wanted something different. And they loved it. They really did love it. And then for family reasons, personal reasons, they moved back. And, you know, haven't looked back. You know, it's very much go with the wind, see where it takes you. And, you know, we loved Australia, loved England. Yeah. So it's been brilliant.
Oh, so they spent a good chunk, like 8.5 years in Australia, which is a long period of time.
Yeah.
When you came back to the UK then and you're growing up, how did you get into gymnastics? And I'm interested to know whether you were that typical classic case of a hyperactive kid or not, because I would say, from my experience knowing you, you're a very kind of level-headed guy. So I'm interested to know what you were like when you first walked into a gymnastics club.
I think from what my mum and dad tell me, I was a terror as a youngster.
Okay, right. So you did fit that mould to an extent.
Yeah, to an extent. I don't think I was necessarily bouncing off the walls, but I wanted to climb. I wanted to do things. And I think mum and dad probably noticed that I needed some structure. And I wouldn't say I'm extroverted in any way. I'm relatively introverted, and I've had to learn to sort of deal with these environments, whether it's competition, you know, at the highest level, or, you know, just simply talking to people over the phone. I've had to really sort of learn how to do that, and started off it was Westborough Sports Centre, which has changed to something else now. And I think I was there for, I'm not entirely sure, but I was about 6, and I got to a point where they said, we see potential. I said to my mum, see potential, here's a leaflet for Pegasus, go and try it out. And I remember there was this one other boy called Daniel that used to go there with me. And again, going back to the being introverted, I remember saying to mum, I think I was about 6.5, and I remember saying, I'm not going unless Daniel's there. And he turned up, and I think we had one session, he didn't like it and quit. And then that was it, forgot about him. I love gymnastics, and that was it.
No way. So you got to thank Daniel.
Yeah, exactly. Daniel, wherever you are, thank you. But no, I've loved it ever since, and it was like that. I guess that's the typical start to the journey, isn't it? But it's been brilliant. I've really loved it.
When you walked into a gymnastics environment then as a kid, James, when you look back now as an older man that's getting towards the end of their career, it's hard to see it when you're a kid, but what physical strength did you walk into a gymnastics environment with, if any? And then also, what personality traits do you think lent itself well to the pressured environment, or even just the environment of high-level gymnastics competition?
I think, for me, I've never been... It's not to say that I have no talent. Of course, there's something there, obviously, but, you know, I was never the fastest, nowhere near the strongest. But I think what sort of made me good as an athlete was the fact that I was willing to persevere, tenacity. And even as a youngster, I don't think I realised that I had that trait, but I just carried on and enjoyed it, and slowly built on what I had. And I think for me, consistency has always been key. You look at any of my competitions, and yeah, of course there's going to be mistakes and things like that, but I'm the guy that likes to go there, do the job for his team, and, you know, be that rock, be that steady guy. And I think that's something I learned perhaps in my later years. I think it was tough for me around 13, 14, because, you know, training with Courtney, he was always making teams as a youngster, and I wasn't quite there. You know, there's no shame in admitting that. That's the way it is again. And for me, it was just, okay, you know, I'm not going to let that throw me off. Of course, sometimes you think, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, but you think, actually, I love the sport, so I'm going to keep going, see where it takes me. And I got to a point it was Youth Olympics in 2013, And actually the year before there was the Junior Euros and I didn't make the team and that was disappointing. But then Youth Olympics, and I remember saying to my mum and dad, if I make this and it's the only competition that I ever do, so be it. That is a great achievement, and even being in and amongst it. And then I made that, went to the competition, had a brilliant time. And then the next thing rolled around and I said, okay, if I make this as well, that's bonus. I'm in bonus time. And then it just kept snowballing, that consistency. I think that was the strength that lent itself to a successful career for me.
Where do you think that mindset and that approach came from, James? Is there an element of, because you weren't that standout junior athlete that was having like success from the get-go, and the fact that potentially you had that right next to you in Courtney, you kind of learned to appreciate the opportunities that you did get? Because when I think back now to that time, that Junior Europeans in 2012 and that crop of gymnasts, you know, I'm thinking yourself, Courtney, Jay, Bryn, Niall, Dom. There's so many, even if you got Frank, Kofi at the time, Tom Gibbs, like that, in terms of a group of juniors, probably the most talented group between a 2-year age gap we've ever had.
Yeah.
That's so difficult to then get onto that team.
Yeah. And they were all so much better than me. You know, they would
Did
just
you view
better.
It that way? Is that
definitely.
how you viewed your own gymnastics at the time?
I was behind. You know, some of the skills they were doing, I even then I acknowledged it was disappointing, but I knew I was behind and I knew it would just take time and to play to my strengths. And I think what actually helped was, oddly enough, a lack of confidence. I think knowing that and feeling that I wasn't as good as those guys, it meant that I had to build block by block, piece by piece. And if I wanted a shot at anything, making a junior team or a senior team, I had to build carefully, strategically. And I think that's what I, with my coach, did and the team around me. I think that's what we did pretty effectively. Even from a young age, we identified the potential that I had and carefully built together.
Were you getting that messaging from the coaching team that you were working with, James? Was that something that intrinsically you were thinking? Were you thinking, right, I think this is going to be I'm playing the long game. I'm going to take this step by step. Maybe I'm not going to make Junior Europeans here, but, you know, I want to do this for the next 10, 15 years. How can I play to my strengths? And maybe rather than being that top guy looking at the next guy trying to beat him, you're just focused on your own gymnastics. Was that messaging coming from, you know, the coaches as well as you, or was it just a one-way street?
I think I was probably too young to identify that in myself.
Okay.
I know my coaches, again, they were young and hungry. I had Ovi and Yanuts, who are two guys that they were good gymnasts in Romania, and they came over early 2000s, and actually, I joined the club shortly after them, really. And I think they knew they had to build something. They had to be careful. They didn't necessarily have a wealth of experience that meant they could say, yeah, we use this formula to do that. They said, okay, let's go slowly. We'll play to James's strengths. He's good on high bar. Not particularly powerful, but he can swing a pommel routine and do a good floor. So we'll just build on that. And it was careful learning, which, you know, they taught me everything back then. And again, going into our later years, I think we got to a point where they finished teaching me everything they knew, and we started building together, which again lent to an even bigger strength in our later years that, you know, brought us closer together and eventually paved the way for success as a senior athlete.
What was that relationship like with those two coaches, mate, and particularly Yanuts? Because when I think about you as an athlete, and the way that you would approach training sessions, I feel like you were probably someone that was very much, right, I'm a student, teach me everything, I'm going to listen. I don't have the answers. I'm willing to learn from everybody. Whereas, look, I'm talking probably personally at times, I think I know better than everybody else, and there's a lot of athletes that maybe fall into that category. Was that the approach for you? And what was that relationship like with Yanuts?
I think... yeah, it's a tricky one, really. I think I was always willing to learn. So long ago, 15 years, really, and that's probably not even a scratch on it. But I was always willing to learn. I think I'm receptive to people's emotions and, you know, the way people deliver things. And I wouldn't say at all I'm a people pleaser, but, you know, I like to collaborate. I like to work with people, and I think that was something maybe I didn't view it like that as a youngster, but I wanted to learn. And, you know, I wanted to put my own spin on things, and I wanted to sort of put my own mark on things, even as a youngster. And I think they were really good at facilitating that. And again, they learned with me. You know, they didn't know absolutely everything. And from what they were 15 years ago, they've continued learning.
So it's very much like equals.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was never. And that's the thing I loved about them. And that's why, and it's rare, I think, to stay with a club your whole career. And I'm not saying that people change for bad things, and, you know, people want different things. And sometimes it's just, you know, life gets in the way. But I think for me, I loved their style of coaching. It was firm but fair. It was always, they taught you to hold yourself to account. They taught you to, you know, go for it, but be measured in your approach. And that's something that I enjoyed. I'm quite meticulous as a person, whatever I turn my hand to. And I think that's something that they fostered, and it worked out for the best. And you look at them as coaches now, and they're developed, they're continually learning, like I said, and they're just nice people. You know, nice people first, and great coaches second.
And would you always, you know, for me, I always say that, James. I say, it doesn't matter to me technically how good you are. The things I'm looking for in a coach, or even somebody that I work with, or a teammate, are kind of those morals and principles that you're bringing to the table. Like, for a coach, I'm always looking for, right, are you on time? Like, are you going to give me everything that I need? Also, I want to work with you. It's not going to be like a dictatorship.
No, exactly.
Like, let's collaborate.
Can't do that.
The technical stuff, like you said, you can learn, right? Because I got to a point with Sergey where I was learning skills he'd never taught before. And maybe in the beginning it was a bit like, right, my ego's getting hurt here. I'm going to pretend I know what I'm doing. And then eventually we kind of started to learn to work together. And then, okay, let's outsource new information to learn how we can do this as a team. And then it worked so much better to collaborative. That's what it was.
Definitely.
The word that you used. Did you have a plan then when you transitioned into becoming a senior gymnast? Because if I look at 2015 and you getting onto that team, and I remember having a conversation with Christian in 2015. So I would have been 22, which would have been about 19, 20 at that time. I can remember Christian saying to me, look out for James. Because when James is doing a routine, I'm confident he's going to hit. And that's what I want from a teammate. When I look to the left, I want to know, I want to feel comfortable he's going to go and hit. And I think at times I was someone where people were like, I don't know what way this is going to go. It could either be incredible or it's going to be a disaster. Whereas like, you certainly filled that role within a team of, this is Mr. Dependable. And maybe took that mantle, carried it on from the likes of Christian, maybe Dan Purvis. What happened in that space between 2013, maybe when you went to that Youth Olympic Games, and then you make your senior debut, and then getting on that team at 2015 that nobody would have seen, right? What did you guys do in that period to put yourself in that position to then be on the team 2 years later? So
there was actually, for me, it was a pivotal moment, and I guess, without sounding cheesy, it was the sort of boy to man. And it was in 2014, and Europeans had rolled round, and whatever guys had gone to that, and you guys, I think you got silver, didn't you, at that one? It was that was in Bulgaria, and that was incredible. And obviously you want a piece of that, and that had finished. Worlds was approaching, and not that Yunus and I were lost, but we were kind of thinking, how do we approach? You know, are we going to make Worlds? I don't know. But I remember turning to him and saying, and we still talk about it now, and this is something I champion to the younger guys. And I said to him, look, you know, I want to train like I'm going to Worlds. I want to train from now. We've got maybe 5 months. I want to train like I'm going. And he said, all right, let's do that. And I think it was a moment of clarity for us where, you know, we started coming in the gym with a purpose. It was like, we know what it takes to be at a World Championships. How do we fill in the blanks to get there? And we started doing that. Didn't make the team, but the next year I was reserved for the World Championships. And it paved the way, and it was just that type of thinking that was almost forwards thinking. It wasn't just, I need to win the next comp. I need to, you know, this needs to go perfectly tomorrow. It needs to be fill in the gaps. And that's what we did, and that's what we've done the whole way, because we've had to adapt. You know, like I mentioned earlier, getting older, bodies, you know, I feel like I don't recover anymore, just perpetually tired. But, you know, that's part of it. And if you want to have longevity, you have to learn how to adapt to deal with that and fill in the blanks.
Is there almost some substance, James, to that phrase, fake it till you make it? You've almost got to live as if you are that athlete already before you've even done it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of confidence, isn't it? And, no one can say, okay, at this comp, I'm going to perform. That's going to be my breakthrough comp. It kind of just happens. And you have to train, like you're going to go there and perform your best. There's no point thinking, oh, well, I might do it. If I'm selected, then I'll start the work. No, I have to start now. And that's what we did. And we did it. And it is tiring. It is exhausting. And that's something, again, I say to the younger guys, that put the work in. Like, it's horrible to have to work hard every day. It feels good, definitely. But you're constantly tired. You're constantly having to be on point with your recovery, with your sleep, with this, that, and the other. And, it is a juggling act, but it's so worth it. And it's not just the results. It's not the medals. It is that commitment to the cause and to something that not many people can do. It's hard to commit yourself to something, especially for so long, and to something so huge. But if you can do that, you can walk away from the sport proud, whether you have 100 medals or none. You can be extremely proud.
Do you almost feel like you have to find something you're willing to commit to 100% with the understanding that it might also not work, but I'm still willing to give everything to it?
And exactly, that's why I think you shouldn't. And as a youngster, I think I put the importance on the medals. I thought, they're what's important. That's gonna make me a good gymnast. And in fact, it's all the other stuff. The medals are one day of the competition of the year, really. And there's 2 majors in a year, but there's 365 days in a year. You have to work, and you have to enjoy it. And the beauty is in the struggle, I think. I used to not necessarily hate working hard. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I got out of it. But you learn to really cherish that. And the days where you want to give up, I know it's cliche, but the days where you want to give up and you push through and you succeed that day, that's sweeter than anything. And you realise that there's so many of those days. There's so many of them that you feel terrible, or maybe you feel good, but you achieve something that day. There's so many of them, whereas the competitions, they're 1 medal on 1 day, and that's it. And they're important, but they're not the be-all and end-all.
It's almost embracing the lifestyle of being an athlete rather than...
Yeah.
I feel like if you're to go on and have longevity, you have to love being an athlete and every element of that. And it can't just be for the medals and the results, or maybe the things that come with that, so the sponsorship money or the funding. I think that's brittle and that will break down fast. You need to be able to just love the process of being able to wake up every day. I often say to athletes now that still try, I'm so jealous, man. To be an athlete.
It is an incredible thing, and you forge friendships along the way that will far outlast the result. Sometimes I can't remember what I got last year, or what I even ate for breakfast this morning. But you've got those friendships that you made and the memories that you made. Those are what are going to stick with you. And for me, I've very much become of the mindset that people aren't necessarily going to remember your results. People that aren't gymnasts, your fans, as it were, they're not going to remember the results, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And it's important to take the time to thank them, really, and to spend some time, whether it's signing things or whether it's just taking that time to message back on Instagram. People will remember that, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Around that time, James, in 2015, in the lead up to it, is that when you started competing in Germany in the Bundesliga?
Yeah, so that was, I think my first one was May 2015.
Okay.
And that was pivotal for me because it was completely different to what I was used to. You get a bit of money for it. That was exciting. I think that's what enticed me. You get a bit of money for it, but it became a lot more than that. It became sort of, for me, it was, you had to perform. They do a really weird warm-up where you basically don't get any warm-up and you might be waiting 40 minutes to do a routine. But then you go, it's all eyes on you, and you want to perform for these people. You want to do well for them. And then it sort of teaches you to, whatever the situation, perform then, there and then. And my team was always very good to me. They used to take me to all these castles and Oktoberfest and all these amazing things. And it's an experience that's, again, I hardly remember the results of the competition.
Yeah.
But I remember how they treated me and what we got up to and just how much I enjoyed it.
Would you advise, James, because when I look back at probably you, Joe, Courtney, Dom as well, around that period, getting into those league matches in Germany, it's almost a chance for you to make mistakes, right? Like it's an opportunity for you to put yourself under pressure every single week and almost become numb to the environment of competition. And, you know, now in the UK, it feels like even more so, there's even fewer competitions to go and compete. So if you're a young gymnast trying to break through from junior to senior, and all of a sudden you've gone from being one of the best in your age group to now having to compete against guys that have 10 years of experience, you're trying to go out there and pull off the best performance of your life in one competition to maybe it's just not enough. You can't expect yourself to be able to compete under those pressures. Would you say that you're, you know, as a young gymnast that's looking to transition from junior to senior and make that transition quite quickly, competing out there as much as you possibly can is a great way to almost earn your stripes?
Absolutely. And I think, again, that's what helped me. But I think it's really important at these competitions to strike a balance, because sometimes there can be, you know, 6 Bundesliga competitions one weekend after another. And you need to think about the future, you know, what you want from your career. If it's to go and do these Bundesligas, absolutely, go for it. But you need to think about the next year and how you're going to progress. And sometimes if you're in competition mode, that means that you're not going to spend time learning these skills, these new skills that need to be learned. And I think you need to strike a balance. Maybe not your hardest routines, because that can be dangerous at these competitions. But, you know, you've got to think about leveling up as well. But I genuinely think they're a good tool, and they're good fun. They are really good fun. And you meet, again, talking about the friendships that you forge, you find some great people there. And I still talk to people now from the Bundesliga, and I haven't competed for 7 years. And it's just nice to sort of still be a part of it in a way.
How important is that communication then between like your own aspirations and then potentially in part going to earn some money, but then also the goals for next year for competing on the GB team? How difficult is it to balance all of those things? You've got your aspirations, the national team's aspirations, your personal coach's aspirations, and how key is the role of communication within that and making sure everybody's effectively kind of working towards the same hymn sheet?
I think it's hard because, and not in a bad way when I say this, but everybody has their different sort of motives and agendas, don't they? You know, for the Bundesliga guys, I'm sure they get funding for results, but not that they ever would expect it to be at your expense, but you wouldn't want it to be at the expense of your development. And I think, you know, identifying that is important, and that's what you have to sort of collaborate with your coach. And it's difficult when you're a younger athlete and potentially you're not on a high level of funding, and you're at that awkward stage where you're 21, 22, and, you know, you kind of maybe want to move out, and, you know, it's not the best money in the world. It's difficult because they might give you €1,000 to go and compete, or 500, or whatever it is that you get paid, and that's really, you know, I'll have some of that, But before you know it, 4 months have gone by, and then it's Christmas, so you have some time off, and then you have to compete in February, where you have to fit a build-up in, and then you want to get from your easy Bundesliga routines to your most difficult. It's hard to sometimes bridge that gap, so I think finding a balance is extremely important. Otherwise, before you know it, 2 years has gone by, and you haven't really moved forwards.
I think that's a really valuable piece of advice, mate, because I'm hearing a lot of young athletes constantly asking me, how do I get into Germany? How do I get into France? And I think probably the motivation behind it is the important thing. I think they're seeing the money, but maybe not thinking about the consequences of being out there competing every week, and then their development, especially if you're a young athlete. And I think you're right. It's maybe being very clear with, what are my goals for the year? Are my goals for the year to maybe get more consistent, or are my goals for the year to make a major championships team? Because they're two very different things, aren't they?
And you can do both. I think you can strike a balance. And to any youngster that's thinking about doing the Bundesliga or a French league or whatever, I'd say do it. You know, they are valuable. And I remember that sort of, you're the only person competing in the hall at that time. And I did all-around World Cups where you have 10,000 people watching. There's 8 of the world's best gymnasts, and you're one of them. You have to go and perform, and it's TV on you, and you're like, oh my God, I can't even do this. But all that practice, it lends something to it. So I'd say do it, but really strike a balance and be strategic with how you approach it.
That year then, James, from 2015, being the reserve for the World Championships team, they go over, they get probably the best team result we've ever had in terms of a global competition, finishing second. And then the Rio Games and missing out on the Rio Games. What did you learn from that period, and how did you approach that time between Rio finishing and then the start of 2017?
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been realistic, maybe sometimes too realistic to the point of hindrance, but I think I knew that I wasn't ready for Rio. I think 2015 Worlds, and not many people know this and are happy to share it, but in 2015, I remember waking up on the day of podium training and I was terrified, and I didn't even have to compete. I went and did my routines. It was relaxed, but I was terrified, and I thought, I can't do this. They're like, there's no way. How do these guys do it? And then I said, all right, do the podium training. Don't run away, do it. And so I did it, and I survived, miraculously. I did it, and it was fine. And then competition day rolled around, and it was a little bit of, well, I'm glad I'm not competing, but there was also a bit of, well, it'd be nice to actually, give yourself a chance. You can do it. You've competed before. And obviously those guys competed, and I was reserved, so I couldn't. But fortunately, I was the bag man. I carried all their bags around, but it was great. I was allowed to be down there on the floor. I was allowed to see how things worked, and I thought it was a valuable experience. And sometimes people can think, reserve's a bit of a rubbish spot, but you learn so much. And even now in Paris, I learned so much, and I certainly don't know it all, but it was a valuable learning experience for me. And I think, again, that'll pave the way for me into whatever I go into, whether it's another cycle or, a life outside of gymnastics. You always learn something. And I think identifying that I wasn't ready for Rio, for me, it was kind of, okay, well, what will I be ready for? And I remember doing the trials and seeing you guys absolutely smash it. I remember your stuck vault. I remember your handspring double front. I remember that clearly. And for me, I wasn't there, and I thought, yeah, okay, that's, I'm not there yet. And then you kind of go back to the drawing board and think, what am I going to need for next cycle? You study the code, you get the strategy right, and you think, okay, this is what I want from it. And again, you go back to filling in the blanks. This is what I want from the next competition is Euros 2017. This is what I want from it. And actually in 2016, after Euros, I went and did the Bundesligas. I did the French leagues, and it was valuable. But again, I found a balance of getting the skills that I wanted in my routines in 2017 and doing them at the end of 2016. And I think that is how I sort of made the leap to European gymnastics and ultimately a medal at that competition.
And then we get to the start of 2017, James, and you're in a period of time where we go into that British Championships and no one really does well. I remember that. I remember being sat down after that British Championships and basically getting a bollock because we all did so shit in that competition.
It was a shame.
I remember being sat down like, we don't want to pick any of you for this team. Basically, that was the conversation. And I remember going into that.
It wasn't so tactful, was it?
We were in a period of time where really on paper, given the back of 2016, myself and Dan Purvis should have been probably going into that Europeans as the two all-arounders because everybody else had taken a break or had retired at that point. And given that we were two of the three reserves for Rio, you would have thought we'd been... I think looking back, me and Dan were probably mentally just a bit fractured at that point. Yeah. But how important is it to take an opportunity when you get one? When you look at that time now and then going into the European Championships as one of the all-rounders, can you just tell me a little bit about that period of time, what you remember, and then the mindset going into that Europeans of, was it right? We spoke about this now for years. This is my time right now. I have to take this.
Yeah, I remember that British because it was a shambles. And I remember actually podium training. I was just doing a little swing on high bar and my guard snapped. And I remember having the competition, and I had actually pretty good comp, but I had to use new guards and ended up falling 3 times and getting no skills counted on high bar. So it was a disaster. But I think, again, for me, it was that steady approach. It's not just the day of the competition. It was do the work, and if you're good enough, the results will come. And if you've done the work, the results will come. And I think when you're in that position, sometimes you get a little bit of imposter syndrome where you think, oh, maybe I'm not good enough, but if you're in the mix for a European Championships, chances are you're going to be good enough when you get there. And entering that competition, we just did, Yunus and I, we just did the same as what we did at home. And that is, for me, was key. It was the same warm-ups, the same goes on each piece. Don't try and change anything. You haven't got to reinvent. Just go and do your job. And that's what happened. I remember qualifying third, and we did an interview in between qualifications and all-around final. And I remember that whoever was interviewing me said, "So James, you qualified in third." And I was like, "No, I don't want to know. I'm just going to go in 2 days' time and do my job." And that's it. And then that was it. Repeated the result, came third. And I remember there's again, going back to the imposter syndrome, there's a picture of me. And I shared the podium with Dalaloyan, a Russian guy, and Vinayev, a Ukrainian. And then there was little old James Hall. They both had flags. And because I was so ill prepared for the fact that I might get a medal, I just had my jacket that said Great Britain on it. So I just stood there like a rabbit in the headlights, not expecting to get a medal, but also not expecting not to. I just went there to do my job, and the results followed. And it was, for me, it was poetic because I was old enough to realise that my coach was Romanian. It was in Romania. And I'm sure there was people thinking, oh, he's left Romania to go to Britain. You know, how is he going to perform? And he went there, came back with not just me as a medalist, but Courtney as well. Courtney got silver on rings, and it was the best championships. It was just incredible. And everybody did well. And it was a pleasure to be a part of. And to share it with someone like yourself, who was the generation above me. It was just everything I wanted it to be, really.
And then from that moment, James, you know, you've talked about having that imposter syndrome, but did that medal in that company, at that point, did you leave thinking, okay, right, no, I am one of the best athletes in Europe right now. Okay, this is my time to push.
I don't think the imposter syndrome ever left me, to be honest. I think even at Europeans this year, I was a bit like, oh, God, because I think you just want things to go well. For me, I always wanted things to go well, but I think what I was good at was following the process. And even heading into Worlds in 2017, later that year, you follow the process, and it ended up being a disaster. You know, I couldn't do all around because a mistake was made, and then I just sort of lost my head and flew off I-bar, and lots of stuff happened. But again, you go back to the drawing board. 2018 rolled around. You follow the same process, the same, you know, confidence in what you do in the gym, and then deliver that in the competition. I don't think the imposter syndrome ever left me, but it was the steadfast in my approach and confidence, shy confidence in my ability, quiet confidence.
Was that a conscious thing in any way in your mindset, James, that you didn't want to, you almost, because you'd spent your junior career not being that guy, you almost didn't want to lose it. You didn't want to get too cocky. You didn't want it to like fall away. Was there an element of that when you approached each competition, or not? Was it just innately, that's just the way you are, that's the way you're wired?
I think, I'm not the most confident, or not outwardly confident anyway. I trust in the work that I've done, but I wouldn't, you know, I don't think I've ever been cocky, unless it's on Xbox or something like that. But you know what I mean? It's like, I feel as though it's not in my nature. And again, you're only as good as the work you've put in. You know, nobody's ever owed anything. And sometimes you can do all the right things, all the work, and still have mistakes, still have a disaster. And that's just the nature of the beast. You've got to take the good with the bad. But again, I think what I champion is just that work over time. That steady work is what built my career.
Tell me a little bit about 2018 then, mate, and how difficult is it? And I know that you did this again in 2022, but when you're in that year where there's 3 majors, what was your experience like in 2018 when you were a younger athlete, and how you were able to cope with that demand physically and mentally throughout the year? What was that experience like in 2018?
I think, so 2022 involved a lot more careful planning. I think, again, being an older athlete, I was 26, turning 27. But 2018, because it was all new, I'd only done 2 majors, and heading into Commonwealths was first, and I had a few World Cups, and the World Cups went great. And then Commonwealths, it was new, it was exciting, and there was a real chance, never guaranteed, but there was a real chance to get a Commonwealth gold medal. Like, that's the stuff you see on TV that you got. And, you know, being in the same team with Max, it was like, whoa. And I remember that competition, enjoyed every second of it, and we didn't really put a foot wrong. Load of medals and amazing. And then you try and continue that momentum. That was in April, and actually we had a lot more time than we did in 2022. That was in April, and then in August was our next comp. That was Europeans. And we ended up doing well, came second as a team. And, you know, we had time to rest. And again, it was all new. And I think I carried that into the World Champs, where I had an 8th place finish all around and just enjoyed it. It was all new. But the stark contrast to 2022 was the fact that it wasn't new. We had less time between competitions. We had to leave Commonwealths early. So the competition's finished. We had a little celebration, and that was it. Next day we go home. And then, was it, I think 2 weeks later, we were out in Germany for Europeans. And I think the adrenaline hadn't worn off, so we were just, okay, let's go, you know, whatever. And we became European champions. I feel like we could have won any competition you put in front of us. And it was incredible. I'd never thought that I'd be a European champion. Again, the imposter syndrome, never thought it would happen to me. But when you've got a group of guys like that around you, Gianni, Court, Joe, Jake, and the coaches as well, you're going to win something. And those guys picked up a few medals of their own, and, you know, I had a few finals and stuff like that, and it was just, felt invincible. But being a bit older, having less time, heading into Worlds, I think we were jaded. And we wanted to do the competitions. I remember the coaches sitting down and saying, look, is it a good idea? Before Commonwealths, is it a good idea to do all these comps? And being the young, hungry lads that we were, we said, well, of course it is. Of course it's a good idea. And because we'd never really done it in those time constraints, we thought, we'll be fine. And then heading into Worlds, you started to feel it. Started to feel the stress. I was tired. You know, I was getting really stressed. And from 2020 to 2022, I was going for a really tough time in my head, and I was going through some really weird things. My hair started falling out, and really? I looked terrible and just getting stressed. And that wasn't because of the gymnastics. It was a combination of things. But heading into that Worlds, it was nothing but stress. Belief, we still had belief. Yeah. But it was just stress. And then I think it showed in our performance while we were there. And it's not, I don't think it's anybody's fault. Again, It was just the unforeseen. And we did a great job with what we got, with what we had. And, you know, you had G walking away as world champion. Courtney, after years, I think that was the sweetest medal for me, was watching Courtney get his rings, training with him for so long. And he'd had so many world finals, and then bang, home crowd. Yeah. He'd had a world medal day before. All right, I'll have another one. And it was just poetic for me.
And that comeback as well was incredible. I remember watching it with like dodgy internet connection in a hotel room in Ecuador. And just like trying to get on Wi-Fi to watch it. Yeah. And I'd like tuned in after Pommel and then saw the comeback. I'm going crazy. Yeah. It's like crazy o'clock in the morning in Ecuador, and Connie's trying to sleep next to me.
Can't be that good. Yeah.
And just amazing in terms of that team and that resilience in that year. Do you think, James, potentially like the stress of that and just the close proximity of all those competitions, it did just physically take its toll on elements of that team? When you look at the injuries that then Gianni went on to have, Joe went on to have, the surgeries, was that around the time you were struggling with your back? Had that been going on for a long time?
No, I wouldn't say that there's much correlation with that year. I had my back problem since 2018.
Right, okay.
You know, injuries were a part of it. You're never going to get an athlete that does high level that doesn't have injuries. And I think, you know, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of those guys. Their injuries are their injuries. I don't know the ins and outs, but I think it was unrelated, really. I think that the stress you put your body under, and we were all willing to do it.
Yeah.
You know, nobody, for me, again, I can't speak for the other guys, nobody was forcing me to do it.
I feel like there was an element of age. You guys were getting a bit older now at this point. It's not 2018 anymore. And 21, 22. You're now all mid-20s.
Yeah, and I think it was the volume. For me, I did 6 pieces at Commonwealths. I dropped down to 4 at Europeans because I hurt my ankle, and then I was back to 5 pieces. So it was quite a lot of work for me anyway. And I was 26, 27 again, getting on a bit. And I think it's just, you know, that's the way it is. That's kind of what you sign up for. And the medical team were brilliant. They did absolutely everything they could, you know, and the support staff, nutrition was on point, this, that, and the other. But it was a mammoth task, and that's that. There was no way around that. But I'm glad we did it.
You know, when older athletes, James, talk about not, you know, you mentioned this right at the beginning, not being able to recover as quickly
At all.
What does that look like, though? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because I think for someone that's not an athlete that's maybe listening, they're like, well, does that mean that, you know, you need a day's extra rest in between a train? What's the tangible? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think for people, you often hear athletes say that, right? I've been through it myself.
Yeah.
It's that ability to, you know, when you're younger, you maybe do routine days back to back.
Yeah.
Or you can do competitions 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row without really physically feeling the stress of that. But what does that look like when you're getting towards your mid-20s, late 20s? What is that athletes are talking about when they're saying, I can't recover as quick? What does that translate to in real terms?
I think for me, it was the time to build up for competitions took longer, in the sense that I had to pace myself a lot more. And I think my advice would be to anybody that's starting to realise that, you know, doesn't have to be just gymnastics, but any sport that's starting to realise that, you know, they're tired more often. They perhaps can't acquire skills as quickly as they used to, or they're just, you know, maybe not as strong as they used to, or just a bit slow or whatever. My advice would be learn how to adapt, whether that's adapting your training, adapting the content of your routines, or whatever it is. I think if you can't adapt, then it's going to fizzle out for you. And I think that was something that I was good at doing. I couldn't do what I could do at 18. At 18, I could come in the gym every day. I'd say I felt tired, but I'd produce the same output every single day, 6 days a week. That was it. Rest day, Sunday, do it again. Whereas now it was very much, sometimes I'd come in the gym this year and I'd have a routine day on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Saturday, whenever. And I'd say to my coach, you know, it's like, there's no way this is going to happen today. I feel heavy, I feel tired, and I would have slept perfectly and eaten perfectly, and you're just tired. So you got to learn to take a step back. And that was something important that happened to me as well, there was a psychologist called Gemma in 2018. She said, because I said I was sort of feeling guilty that sometimes I was feeling tired and I had to sort of not do a routine day, or, you know, I had to adapt. And she said part of it is knowing when to take a step back, knowing when to say, actually, I've got to take one step back here to take 2 forwards. And that was extremely valuable to me. It might seem obvious, but when you're young, you think, no, I have to be on it every single day. It's just not realistic. So knowing when to take a step back, to take a couple forwards is invaluable, and you'll need that even more into the older part of your career.
How difficult is it to have that conversation with yourself, mate, and be honest? Because your ego is there, right? And your ego wants to say, no, we can still do this.
Yeah.
I can still push. I'm tougher than this. I can still do it. And I'm sure you will have seen this. I've seen this countless times. I've seen this within myself, of that almost not wanting to be honest with yourself with where you're at right now. And for me, it took somebody else having that conversation with me for me to really realise how important is that in an athlete's career, James, in terms of them being able to, like you said you've done, is adapt and change and then approach it slightly differently and almost treat yourself as a different athlete to the athlete you were 4 years ago.
Yeah. And you're not the same athlete, and in all honesty, you shouldn't be. You should be learning, you should be developing. That is key. You should be moving forwards, you know, whether it's in gymnastics or just in life, you should be learning things and, you know, never stop learning. And I think it's hard because, like you say, you do have your ego. You do think, well, I don't want to feel like shite all the time. I don't want to feel bad, so I'm just going to ignore it. But for me, I was always proactive in the sense where I could talk some sense into myself and say, well, hold on, James, if you push yourself and get injured, a bad injury, and you have to have 9 months out, you'll be annoyed that you didn't just have a day off then, or just came in and stretched. You'll be annoyed at yourself for probably forever. It could end your career. It could finish you. You wouldn't forgive yourself. Or you can have a day off, a week off, and reset your mind and come back fresh, start again, and not have that injury, not have that real problem that could cost you everything, or even cost you a week. You know, nobody wants to lose a week, but sometimes it's better to take that than to take the ultimate loss.
Let's go back one step, mate. Just tell me about your Olympic experience, because it's a massive moment, right? And you talked about it being the symbol, and you know, I clearly remember as a kid watching 2004 and seeing a gymnast with an Olympic rings tattooed on the back of the neck and thinking, whoa, I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
I don't understand
but I want it. Yeah.
That's what I want, you know? What was it like, that experience competing at an Olympic Games? And yeah, just tell me about it and your experience that you had.
For me, it was everything I wanted it to be. And I think when I got home, it was difficult because everybody seemed to be fixated on the fact that, yeah, but there was no crowd, James. Like, it can't have been the same. No, but it was. It was the same. For me, it was something that I dreamed of, to go there, to be in that arena. It is that symbol. It is something you worked towards forever. And to go there and to be at an Olympic Games and to perform, and a key theme that I realised, no matter who it was, whether it was friends, family, people that had been in the sport, people that hadn't, was just enjoy it. You know, sometimes I'd say, oh, I would love this to happen, this result. And they say, yeah, but just enjoy it. And at first I was like, that's weird. Like, I'm going to, but why is that more important? And then you think, actually, you know, this is a common theme here. If I can go to this Olympic Games and hate every second of it, it doesn't matter that I've been to Olympic Games if I've hated it. But if I've gone and enjoyed it, and again, like we talked about before, then sometimes the nature of the beast is you go and you have a shit show like that. That's it. That is it. But you enjoy it because it's more than just competing. You're there. You've earned that spot. Everybody that's there has earned it. And I remember every morning I'd go onto the balcony of our room and I'd just look down into the little park area, and there'd be boxers doing their thing on the pads. There'd be runners. There'd be skateboarders. And you think, this is a privilege. Like, this is incredible. What an experience. And yeah, it was COVID. Yeah, we had to spit into a tube every morning, but I'm not going to let that rob me.
Yeah.
It was that symbol. It was that beauty of the competition. And you're there with some of your best mates. What more could I ask for?
What was it like, though, actually performing those routines, James? Can you remember what it felt like putting your hand up in an all-around final at an Olympic? That's something, you know, being somebody that is an all-arounder, you know, like yourself, has had success as an all-arounder, and being someone that, for me, it's the pinnacle of our sport, right? So I dreamt of being in an Olympic all-around final. Like, what was that like? I'd just love to know what that felt like, that moment, you know, what you're thinking before you put your hand up to do your first routine and maybe your last routine in that situation.
I think for me, it was, the competition experience was everything I'd built it up to be in my head, which I don't know if that's a rare thing, but it was, again, going back to my methodical mindset, I kind of forecasted, I was relatively experienced at that point, forecasted as to how it would feel in the comp, and at the end of the day, you kind of have to approach it the same as you would an English champs or a British champs or a world champs, Olympic Games. You go there, you compete, and you do your job. And yeah, it was just, I remember sitting in the tunnel before, and that's the bit that nobody sees. You know, you're in there an hour and a half before warming up, doing all your swinging about on the apparatus, and then they call you to line up. You start getting cold. They take you through. The TV's probably showing all this amazing stuff, and you're sat there with a jacket over your shoulders, with a cameraman in your face going like this. And I'm there shaking like a leaf thinking, this is it. Like, I'm about to become an Olympian. I really want this to go well. And that was for me. Maybe it's different for other people, but I was thinking, please let this go well. And then we started rings, and that was it. You become an Olympian after your first, well, for me anyway. People might have different benchmarks for becoming an Olympian, but mine was to get there, put my arm up, even if I'd done, you know, one skill and disappeared. Like, I would have been an Olympian, but no, and it was just everything I wanted it to be. Oh, calm, collected, and the fact that there was no crowd didn't make a difference. I knew that there was millions of people watching on the other side of the screen, and all of your friends and family back home, and you know, it was just everything I wanted it to be. It was incredible.
It's interesting, James, that you talk about the period of time following the Olympic Games and the build-up maybe to 2022 where you struggled mentally, because I think, you know, you're somebody that people labelled quite early on as the Iceman, the postman, the new Daniel Purvis. He's dependable. He always hits routines. You go back to that conversation I had with Christian. That must be a pressure as well at times. Like, oh, everybody just expects me to hit all the time. But I think people would be interested to know from somebody that's considered super dependable, very level-headed, doesn't get too emotional. You know, the way you've spoke today, you're definitely somebody that, you know, doesn't get too down on themselves if things don't go right, doesn't get too high if things go well. Just tell us a little bit about that time mentally that you struggled with. Was there an element of that being post-Olympic Games? Was it just the period you were in your life? You talked about being a little bit lost there. I just think that would be valuable for people because, you know, you're someone that everybody would maybe typically, if we're talking about stereotypically someone that struggles mentally, you might not be that type of person that people would think straight away.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, level-headedness comes naturally. But I think 2020 was obviously a difficult year for everybody. And I think, again, going back to the fact that Olympics was something that I really wanted. And I think what made it worse was in 2020, there was a World Cup series where there was 4 World Cups, and out of those 4, the best performing nations, not names, but nations, got an extra spot to the Olympics. And it was the top 3 per competition. And I went to America and came 3rd. And I remember messaging my family at the arena after I'd finished, got the medal and stuff, and going, oh, you guys have no idea how good this is for my Olympic campaign. Like, this is brilliant, like, great start, thanks, blah, blah, blah. And then a week later, the next World Cup got cancelled that I was supposed to go to. And I thought, okay, this is strange. Like, then surely they won't cancel the Olympics, whatever. And I think there must have been something going on in my head that I didn't really pay attention to, and, you know, didn't make me feel particularly bad. But then once everything got cancelled, I was sort of introduced to myself because I had so much time with myself, because it was just training stopped. You know, I managed to get a pommel back home. I had a pommel horse in my dining room and a load of weights, and I had a springboard and a mat that I took into the garden, was just doing basic stuff, obviously nothing too dangerous, but trying to keep on top of it. And then they cancelled the Olympics. For the best, you know, that was the way it was. But then I thought, well, what now? Like, I've been James the gymnast for so long. Who am I now? Like, what am I supposed to be until everything starts up again? Because this year's a write-off. The next 9 months are gone. What do I do now? And then it was compounded by the fact that when we did get back to training, I started having a shoulder injury. And then I started questioning things. I thought, I feel as though, like we spoke about with recovery, there's probably a point in your career, I don't know when it is, when you start to just, not necessarily degrade, but you just start to feel things a bit more. And I was worried that I'd gone from in my peak, COVID had hit, and I just lost my peak, and that was it. I was finished. And then you start to just panic, really. And I thought, oh, well, what now? You know, who am I? Like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? And I think I struggled with that for a long time. And even when the injury sort of subsided, it was just, do I love this sport anymore? I obviously do, because I'm still doing it and I'm enjoying it. But who am I? Like, how do I fit into all of this? Where do I go after this? And it wasn't even the end of my career that was daunting me. And even now I'm very close to it, but still got time left, obviously, but I'm much closer to it, but I'm not daunted by it.
Okay.
And I started to identify that there was things inside of me perhaps that were not quite right. And it took me a while to sort of figure out what they were. And I think for me, a big thing was my principles and actually being the person that I wanted to be. I was sort of not necessarily avoiding things that I should be doing, but stuff that needed working on, I was just saying, no, I'm a gymnast, like I just need to focus on training. Whereas there was actually things that probably definitely needed work. And it wasn't until 2022 where I actually spoke to a psychiatrist. And I found that everything was heading in the right direction. I was making progress within myself. It just didn't feel like it.
Okay.
And speaking to a psychiatrist, I just needed somebody to fan the flame. The fire was there. It felt as though it had burnt out, but the fire was there, and I just needed someone to, you know, blow on the embers, and that was it. And I had a few sessions, 4 or 5, and he gave me loads of homework and tasks. And by the end of it, he said, okay, well, we're at the end of our sessions. If you need any more, then, you know, get in touch. And I said, he said, oh, do you want to schedule one for you know, it was September time. He said, maybe January. And I said, actually, I'll leave it for now.
Yeah.
And I will make the choice to come back to you.
Yeah.
Because that was something I was terrible at before. I'd just get to the end of something and go, oh, it's done. Like, no. And tell people, yeah, no, I'll just come back, but never do it. And I said, actually, if I get to January and I feel pretty bad, then I'm going to go back to him. And I think I had one more session, and then that was it.
Yeah.
I found sort of my place and what I wanted to be as a human, as a gymnast, and how I wanted to sort of help other people, pay attention to other people, and found my sort of role, as that were. And I've been pretty good ever since, and feeling good and feeling like I have direction, which is important. So it wasn't just the gymnastics for me that, you know, was a problem.
Yeah.
It was me as well, and identifying that was hard because I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted there to be a problem that I could get rid of.
Yeah.
And that would fix me, but that wasn't the case.
What would you say was the overarching thing that you probably learned about yourself in that period, James?
I think for me it was, I thought about this a lot, and I think it was the fact that I had principles that I wanted to live by. You know, how I wanted to treat people, how I wanted to, and I'm not saying I was treating people poorly, but perhaps I wasn't making the effort, you know, in certain places, and the effort with myself to feel better, to do things that made me feel good, because I knew that spending time with family and friends would make me feel good. But I got into this hole of, oh, do you want to do this, James? And I go, oh, no, I'm all right. I'll just chill. I need to rest because of training.
Yeah.
When really that's not how I felt. I knew it would feel good to go and do these things because it would make other people feel good. And that's what I get a kick out of. And I just wasn't doing those types of things. I wasn't doing the self-care. I wasn't paying attention to the, you know, I didn't run the diagnostics. I had all these flashing lights, but just cracked on anyway. And it got the better of me in the end. But for me, I just, again, that same thing that I learned in gymnastics, follow the process, fill in the blanks. Okay, this needs work, that needs work. I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to do it this time. And actually in 2022 Worlds, that was when I was speaking to the psychiatrist beforehand, and he said, and I said, a real problem with competitions for me is the fact that I get so stressed that I go into this little bubble. And that's not to say I don't interact with the other guys. I sort of force myself to in a way, but I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tricky one. It's hard to explain. And he said, well, why don't you make an effort to do things like the hotel you're in, there's going to be somewhere nearby to go for a coffee. Why don't you suggest going for a coffee with the lads? Like, it's uncomfortable for you, but it's the right thing to do. Mm. So I started doing things like that. I started going, oh, guys, why don't you come back and we'll watch a film? Or, you know, I always hate playing cards. I just don't really get any fun, like enjoyment out of it. But then Joe was begging me, so I was like, yeah, go on then. I won't just sit on the Xbox. I'll play. Yeah. And then I ended up enjoying it, and they ended up enjoying it. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff that was important to me, and I just didn't really realise that before.
That's really interesting, mate, because I remember that when I came out of therapy when I was 26, I essentially had like a page just about me and the way my brain works. And one of the goals that I had was to have birthday cake on my birthday, which sounds ridiculous, but it was a bit like that, right? And on that day, my brother was moving to Australia. And so it was quite an emotional day, because at that point, my brother had been my anchor for like the last 2 years. And Connie had made me a birthday cake, and we took it to the airport and ate it in the airport. Yeah. And that will sound crazy to other people, but for me, that was kind of breaking that mold that I was stuck in, you know, and that doing something like just, and it sounds crazy having birthday cake on your birthday, right? But like typically in the past, I'd be very rigid and for me, it was freeing. It was very freeing. Like, and it was great. And I think that helped me to appreciate that, like, there are more important things, and I'm not just this one-dimensional person as an athlete. There are other parts to me.
And knowing that you can change, I think that was a big thing. I think part of the problem was the fact that, not necessarily in any arrogance or anything like that, or I think it was just naivety. You go through a lot in your early 20s, don't you? In your late teens, you finish school and you're out in the big wide world, and you think, well, surely everything that's happened to me is going to happen to me has pretty much already happened, apart from children and this, that, and the other. And then you get slapped with, you know, your mental health takes a hit, and you think, whoa, that's new. Yeah. And it is that naivety, and then you start to learn. And it was interesting watching Frank's podcast with you that I didn't really pay any mind to the fact that your brain isn't fully developed until you're in your mid to late 20s. And for me, it wasn't like oh, just blame it on that. It was, oh, right, okay, I understand it. It's probably all right to be feeling like this. It's probably, well, it is normal.
Yeah.
And it is fixable. There is a way to do it. And there were certain steps that I took, just doing things that I enjoyed as opposed to not doing them.
Yeah.
Doing things that I knew would make me feel good, make other people feel good. That was key. Whether it was 20 minutes of gardening, which I knew that was infallible, like I could not be unhappy while doing that, or, learning language, challenging myself, something like that. It was just, if I spent 20 minutes doing that, that's 20 minutes out of the 24 hours that I wouldn't feel terrible, or, I wouldn't, I couldn't feel terrible. Then you turn that into half an hour somehow. And a lot of people feel, and I did too, it was scared to spend time with themselves. Like, God forbid you sat in a room silently with no music on. And I was the same. It was, some people feel like that, maybe a lot of people. And now I'm happy to spend time with myself. I didn't even have the radio on the way up here. I was just thinking, 3 hours, just thinking, inventing things for the business, or, what I might say on here, or things like that. And it was a healthy place to be. And getting to that took a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it when you get there.
It's amazing what you say there about change, mate, and I think that's a brilliant message for anybody listening. I remember one thing that I genuinely think the thing I'm probably most proud of in my career was changing my approach to the sport, because that was so difficult for me to do.
Yeah.
I'd been so fixated on this one way, and people had told me for years and years to, like, lighten up, relax, enjoy it.
Yeah.
A bit like they were saying to you about the games, right?
Yeah.
So for me to be something complete polar opposite and just go in and just enjoy it and have a great, it was so difficult. But my experience was just polar opposite. It was incredible. I imagine I was a delight to be around. Whereas prior to that, I'd probably been quite an intense person to spend time with. So amazing message there, mate. Just to finish, because I know your career isn't finished, mate, and you've had that period of being a reserve for the Olympic Games this time, and, the way you approached that, I messaged you and said, just incredible, the way you handled that, the way you spoke about the team, because it is difficult. It doesn't matter how much you tell yourself, it's okay, it's still hard. So I thought that as a lesson for any young athlete that ever gets selected to be a reserve. It's an important role. Don't take it for granted. No. Do your best, because you still never know what's going to happen. And you have to make sure that if the opportunity does come, you're there and you're ready to take it, because you would kick yourself if you weren't.
Definitely.
Just tell me a little bit, what was the run-in like to the games? And I'd just be interested to know from you, throughout your career, were you aware that there is a political game that gets played? I understand this. I'm going to treat this very rationally and logically. And maybe not what toll does that take on you as an athlete, what toll does that take on your coach? Because that's something that doesn't get spoken about, I don't think. But coaches are in a very difficult position, and when they get put in those meeting rooms where they have to fight for their athletes, have you seen that pressured situation take a toll on your coaches over that period of time, and have they learned to manage that like you have yourself as an athlete?
Yeah, I think
that's a big question. There,
I think, again, going back to coach and my relationship, I think the beautiful thing about it is that we've learned together, and people, the focus is always on the athlete, I suppose, isn't it? The coaches, they've got a tough job of doing all the work in the shadows, essentially, and I know the athlete does a lot of that as well, but it's, for a coach, they have dreams as well. They have dreams to go to Olympic Games. They're humans. Again, I said earlier, it's coach first. Human first, and then coach second. And the same for an athlete. You're a human first and an athlete second. And yeah, I guess it's less politics, I suppose. My view would be less politics, and it's just, they're humans at the end of the day. The selectors are humans, and there's a lot to take into account. It's not always just first past the post. It's, you've got experience, prior results, and all the selection policies are public and things like that. So if anybody's interested, it's a good idea to look at those, because you see all the ins and outs. But, you've got personal opinion. I've got my opinions. The selectors have theirs. And it's a difficult one. It definitely takes its toll, because for my coach, again, and I want to stress that Olympics isn't the be-all and end-all. he's been to every major except an Olympic Games. And it was lovely because he came out to Paris and we watched the competition together. British Gymnastics got him a ticket, got me a ticket. It was excellent. But I know he will have wanted to have gone to Olympic Games, but we both know that the time we've spent together and what we've built and what we've forged is far more precious than any one competition and any one decision. It's just, that is it. We've loved it. And we're still not done, but that is what you want at the end of it. That is a successful career to me. There's that line from Cool Runnings, I think it was, if you're not enough before the medal, then you're not going to be enough with it. And you need to shift your focus to enjoying the people around you and the experience.
What's one thing you admire most about Yunus, James? Because I've always had a lot of respect for him. I think the way he conducts himself, very polite, always comes to chat to me.
Very authentic.
Always open to, I never feel like I'm having to read between the lines.
Yeah.
He's just himself.
Yeah, he's extremely...
And I feel comfortable around him. Yeah,
he is himself, and he's just, I think what he's excellent at, and anybody that sort of moves to Pegasus, and even anybody that asks, I'll say to them that the best thing about him is the fact that he's so human. When we go in the gym, it's not just gymnastics. He'll talk about other things. He'll always ask, how are you feeling? You know, whether it's governed by what's happening in the gym or, you know, are you all right? Like, and he'll happily talk about other stuff, his home, his life in Romania. Before that, he's just human. And we don't just hang around in the gym. He comes to my house, I go to his. Like, it's a beautiful relationship. And that's the magical thing about Pegasus. You get that of a lot of people there. And if there was one quality that I was looking for in a coach, it would be what Yunus has. And it is that human touch and the ability to switch off from gymnastics and just be normal.
Amazing. Just to finish then, James, you know, you've always struck me as someone that's planned ahead. What I mean by that is, from an early age, I remember you telling me that I think you told me, like, on the back of the last financial crisis, you had an ISA that was giving you like 15% interest or something. I feel like I remember that, and you maybe used that to get a deposit on your first house. You spoke about one day becoming a policeman, maybe when you retired. And now you're still training, you're still competing, but you've started the brand that you're wearing today. Just tell me a little bit about that, mate, how it's gone, how you found that experience and what you guys are hoping to get out of it.
Yeah, I think everybody still asks for wants to be a police officer. And if there's one thing that I can clear up here, is that I don't anymore. Joe loves reminding me. Talk about it after. No, I think, again, going back to how I felt in 2020, sort of, I think things changed, and I think I realised that being a police officer wouldn't be for me. You know, it was just my choice. And I think with the brand, I like something that I can create. You know, I am methodical, but I feel like I do have a bit of creativity, and I want to sort of bring that to life. And the whole point of the brand is that anybody can wear it. And I think a lot of brands expect you to be special, to wear their clothes. But for us, we want people to feel special when they wear it. To feel as though, yeah, actually I'm proud to put this on, and to feel a part of something. Because we're in our infancy at the moment, and whenever somebody makes an order, we remember that name. Yeah. We see it and we think, thank you, you're part of the gang, like this is it. And we always message, we always, you know, write a little note. And that's what it's all about, and we want to carry that as we grow. And that's something, whatever I go into, whether it's the clothes or not, I think the important thing is to make people feel a part of something. And everybody wants to feel important. I think that's part of being human, and it's making people feel that is key.
In terms of getting to the product that you've got now, James, I feel that gymnasts, being bodyweight athletes, that the slightest change of even what you're wearing, the pommel horse you're on, you're very aware of like how something feels when you're wearing it. How key was that in terms of designing it and making sure that you were happy with how it felt? You know, I know that you've got a lot of gymnasts that are going to wear the kit when they train, like the shorts and the T-shirts. Was that an important thing? Because for me, I know that like there's certain shorts, certain sizes that I like, colours, the way it feels, the socks that I wear when I'm doing routines. Was that important for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. We didn't want to just, you know, make anything. We wanted to make something that, again, as well as feeling a part of something, you put it on and think, oh, actually, that feels quite nice. And being an athlete, like you say, you go through loads of different clothes, and whether it's sponsors, and some things you put on and think, that's not very comfortable and that's not going to help. But we really wanted to make something. And again, it's not a finished product.
Yeah.
There'll be improvements, whether we see them now or not. But we wanted to make something that people put on and go, actually, yeah, this feels good. Like, this is good stuff. Well done, guys. Like, happy to be a part of it, happy to support. And that's what's important. That, for me, it's making people feel good about themselves and, you know, whatever they turn their hand to, giving people the confidence.
Brilliant, mate. Just to finish then, what are your plans moving forward? We're in that weird limbo time when the Olympic Games finishes. This time the code of points is changing completely. Where is your headspace? Is your headspace at not doing any gym at the moment? Is it I'm in the gym? Is it I'm thinking about the next cycle? Or are you just taking it as it comes at the moment?
Yeah, so I've been back in the gym. And again, I love the hard work. I've not been, you know, swinging on all the apparatus. I've been focusing more on conditioning. It's probably why I look absolutely massive right now. But it's just, I love feeling fit and I love challenging myself in a different way. You know, as a gymnast, I was always scared to do squats just in case it hurt my back. And I'm still a gymnast, but, you know, I've started doing squats for the first time ever. And it's agony. My legs are destroyed, but I've enjoyed that side of things, sort of reinventing. And I want to get my own skill in the code. And I'm very close to doing that, but it takes a certain competition to do it, a World Cup or Europeans or Worlds. And all of them are on the cards for me. I don't want to say I'm retiring right now because I'm not. I want to see how I feel. But first things first, get my skill done and then take it from there.
Have you got the skill ready?
Yes.
Ooh.
Can't divulge the information.
Can you not tell us it? Can you tell us the apparatus?
Parallel bars.
Oh, okay, exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. Actually, I did it in 2015 first.
Okay.
But just, it's quite a big skill. And again, it didn't really fit into...
Right, okay.
It was not risky in terms of health, but, you know, I wouldn't want to go to a competition and blow my chances of making a team. But now I feel as though I'm in a unique position where I can completely blow it if I want to. No, but I can try it and...
that's exciting.
Give it a go. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Brilliant.
So I'm still working, still in the gym. I'm in the gym 4 days a week at the moment. Just building, getting strong. Still swinging, still love it. So
amazing, mate. James, where can people go to find the clothing and then also to follow you?
So sartorswear.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook and things like that. And just go to my profile. I'm sure it's plastered all over that. But yeah, come and join us. Come and join the community. It is a great thing to be a part of, and you'll see.
Thank you, mate. James, it's been a pleasure. When I started this podcast, I always had this conversation in mind. I always thought that this would be a really, really interesting chat to have. And yeah, I just want to thank you, mate, for giving us your time, driving such a long way
No problem.
on a Tuesday, and keep doing what you're doing, mate.
Cool.
Top
Thank
man.
you very much.